trying to remember what I said, and I remember what I said in the afternoon, what I said in the evening. What I want to talk about today is the attitude of the Chasidic movement towards Kabbalah. Kabbalah has many facets. Kabbalah is a system, very complex system with a lot of detail, a lot of structure, a lot of careful definitions, a lot of deductions, theorems, and there are places in the Zohar where you have extended essays on these abstract matters, the Idris, Safra de Sinusa. Then there are places where the Zohar gives pshat. In fact, there is a publication called Zohar Anigla, the Revealed Zohar, which is a set of Chumash with comments of the Zohar on the Psukim, explaining what they mean in fairly straightforward fashion. You don't need any special training to understand it. It's translated into Hebrew, and it just sounds like, explanations that you would get from any commentary. And there are many cases where, a third style, where the very abstract ideas in the first part are applied to verses and or to mitzvos to give you a kind of extra dimension of understanding. So it's a kind of middle ground. It's taking material that everybody knows and then gives it a certain extra dimension. Now, by the way, one place you can find this in the Cedar is in the introduction to the mitzvahs of Talis and Tefillin. The Cedar is a long page of introduction, which of course almost nobody says, but it is the kavanah, the understanding and intention you should have before you do the mitzvah. If you read it carefully, read it with some attention. They are written by Kabbalists, and you can see in them certain ideas which could be worthy of analysis. I'm going to tell you a few in a few minutes. A very good example of this, so I saw it in the Tzitzis, is a Gemara in Ksubas, where the Gemara sets out an idea, and if you pay attention and you think critically, there's definitely a hole in the idea. The idea just doesn't work. And the Tzitzis, using a Kabbalistic background, plugs the hole with a brand new understanding, as an understanding that has ripple effects elsewhere. The Gemara says the following. Some human actions are greater than some divine actions. Because there's a verse where HaKadosh Baruch Hu describes his own activity in creating the universe, and he says, with his hand, meaning his right hand, he created the heavens, and with, and let's see, how's it good? With his hand, meaning his left hand, he made the earth, and with the right hand, he made the Shemayim, the heavens. Each one of them is a one-handed action. There's another verse. When we built the Mishkan, the tabernacle, it says, Mikdash Hashem konani yadecha. There it says, a holy place, O Hashem, have your hands established. There the word hands is plural. Now take as an axiom, two-handed actions are greater than one-handed actions. Take that as an axiom.
Greater in what sense?
Some sense. You're right to ask, but I don't have to answer for the sake of the point of the Gemara. They're greater in some sense. The two-handed actions are the one-handed actions. And the Gemara says, who made the tabernacle? Whose actions are being described as two-handed? Our actions in making the tabernacle. So our actions in making the tabernacle are called two-handed, whereas God's actions in creating the heavens and earth are called one-handed. So you see, at least in this case, and this is not just a trivial case, This is the creation of heaven and earth as opposed to the creation of the tabernacle. Our actions are given superiority over his actions. That's what the Gemara says. Thank you very much. But now the Tzaddik points out that the verse that describes our actions as two-handed, according to the Gemara, which gives our actions superiority, the words in that verse are, a holy place, Hashem, have your hands established. So, the verse is talking about Hashem's hands. You'll tell me, okay, but wasn't it our hands that built the tabernacle? Yeah, it was. That's true. But you have a glitch here, because if you're trying to show a description that makes our actions greater, because they're two-handed actions, it's hard to use a verse that describes it as God's hands. Somehow there's a disconnect between the verse and the conclusion that you want to draw. So Tzaddik says you have to understand what it means when a Jew does a mitzvah. A Jew does a mitzvah as a shliach of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The word shliach, as I have told you often, means agent. Does not mean messenger. A shliach very often doesn't say anything to anybody, doesn't carry any messages for anybody. A shliach is someone who acts on someone else's behalf. It's like in American law, or English law, something called the power of attorney. I can sign a document and give it to you, and you can sign my name to a contract, and I'm bound by the contract, even though I didn't sign it, because you signed for me. I gave you the authority to sign in my stead, so your signature binds me. The idea of a shliach is exactly the same thing. The action of the shliach binds the one whom he represents. So, for example, if I give a ring to a shliach and I say, go and propose marriage to that woman, he does so and he hands her the ring, I end up married to her, not he. He's just my shliach, he's my agent. He's conducting the marriage on my behalf. Okay, says the Tzaddik. If you understand that every mitzvah that a Jew does, he does as an agent of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, then the morning suba is read like this. We are talking now about two different kinds of divine actions. This is stage one. Two different kinds of divine actions. One is divine actions that Kadosh Baruch Hu performs on his own by himself, so to speak. And the other is divine actions that Kadosh Baruch Hu performs through human agency. Both are divine actions. But there's a difference. Which divine actions are greater? The ones he performs on his own versus the one he performs through human agency. Now the proof of the Gemara is perfect. The divine actions God performs on his own are described as one-handed divine actions. The divine actions that he performs on the basis of human agency are described as two-handed divine actions. So now it's apples and apples, not apples and oranges. But then you can draw the final conclusion. Look how great man's actions are. Man confers on God a level of agency, now listen carefully, that he doesn't exercise by himself. I don't say that he can't. Nothing stops the Kodesh Baruch Hu from doing whatever he wants. But he doesn't do it. He gives over to man to be the agent for the higher level of divine action. And this tells you the greatness that man has in contributing something to the divine, which God doesn't exercise on his own. So that makes, I think, plain sense out of the Gemara. Without saying something like that, the Gemara has a hole in it. Just in terms of shot, it definitely has a hole in it. Let me finish with one final observation. Now, in the Gemara, you have the term shliach mitzvah. And shliach mitzvah have special consideration. For example, if a person is a shliach mitzvah, he doesn't do any other mitzvah. He may be just going to do the mitzvah or preparing for the mitzvah. But if something else, the mitzvah comes his way, he doesn't do it because he's a shliach mitzvah. Also, a shliach mitzvah isn't subject to normal dangers. certain normal dangers a shliach mitzvah can ignore. Why is that? Well, we have a rule about shlichus, about agency, shlichus shel olam kamoso. The shliach of a person is like the primary agent himself, like the person who's sending him, the person who's behind him. He takes on his character. Hare, if I make someone a shliach for me, and he signs the document, I become bound by the document. So it's as if I signed the document. So you see that his action becomes my action. And in this case, since the shliach mitzvah is a shliach of a Kadosh Baruch Hu to do the mitzvah, he takes on some of Kadosh Baruch Hu's invulnerability. Those threatening dangers have no power over Kadosh Baruch Hu. And here, since the person is acting on the Kadosh Baruch Hu's behalf, acting as his shliach, he gains some of that invulnerability. Now, I suggest to you, just as an exercise, to ask people with black hats and double-lined black yarmulkes, what is a shliach mitzvah? And very often, that phrase is recited as if it were one long word, shliach mitzvah. And we know what he's doing. He's on his way to ransom Jews who are held for captive to pay their ransom, or he's on his way to Beis Medrash to learn, and there's certain rules that apply to him. And just ask the person, please take apart this phrase into its two components, shliach, comma, mitzvah, and tell me, what does it mean? Shliach, mitzvah. Who shliach is he? What kind of shliach is he? What is the shlichus that's going on here? How do I know? Because I studied in yeshiva for years. It didn't occur to me till I saw it in the Chasidic. I thought, hey, wait a minute. Shliach mitzvah. Yeah, shliach. Oh, look at that. It's got to be somebody shliach. I wonder what it means. And then it feels, so here you're using a very metaphysical idea to give a plain shot in the Gemara and to understand this concept and the background to the concept. But it's a Kabbalistic idea in that it's the metaphysics of the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu that underlies these halachas. Yeah, sorry, you had a question.
I think somewhere along the lines the Rav has answered it, but I was thinking of an article that I read from Rebbitzin actually this past Shabbos. It was from last Shabbos, and she was saying that in order to defeat the Yetzer Hara is a similar idea,
Yeah.
similar concept in regards to the song, the Haftarah with Devara, and how the point is I was thinking about how somebody who was a shaliach could also be not necessarily somebody who you see it's like a intermediary who we can't perceive. Yes, there's a Hashem, and there's also I don't know. For example, there was the Malach who I forget one of the forefathers met along the way. Or Yosef, I forget.
Yosef, when he was looking for his brothers.
There's a son shaliach, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now the word malach semantically also means shaliach. A malach is one who performs an activity. He's an agent. That's the right way to translate malach also. Again, not messenger, but agent. So Kodesh Baruch Hu's agents, and yes, in that sense, it's being done indirectly rather than directly. That's a whole metaphysics of that. What does it mean, direct, indirect, and direct? Isn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu running the whole world? Yes. And the answer is yes and no. Usually, as the usual Jewish answer is. So this is one of the examples of where Chassidus use this kind of Kabbalistic idea to explain. There are many other examples. For example, there are a lot of mitzvahs that depend upon right and left. So, tefillin. Which hand do you put the tefillin on?
The weak arm.
Say again?
The weak arm.
Yeah, not the left arm. The weaker arm. Yad Keya, the Gemara teaches. Yad Cha, in one place is spelled Yud Dal Chaf Hey. You don't need a Hey for that word. The Darshan says if it was Kaf Hey Hey, Keh means dark, cloudy. And it means you put it on the weaker hand. And if you're right-handed, then that's your left hand, your left arm. By the way, let me just put in a footnote here because I realized recently that there's a little bit of confusion here. We have a distinction between mitzvahs shebagufo and mitzvahs not shebagufo. And a mitzvah shebegufo is something which you are commanded to perform, and a mitzvah shebegufo, you can't make a shliach, you cannot make an agent to do it for you. And if it's a mitzvah that where the mitzvah is to accomplish something, then, since it's only to have it accomplished, you could send a shliach to do it as well. Kiddushin, effecting a marriage, right? It's not a mitzvah shebegufo. You need to be married. That's why you can make a shliach to take the ring and give it to a woman, and he hands it to the woman, and you become married. When a dead body is found outside a city, and the elders are supposed to measure the distance from the city, there you cannot make a shliach. Why? Because even if there's only one city in the vicinity, one city is 200 meters away, and the next nearest city is 6 miles away. Open your eyes, and you can see which is closer. No, you have to measure. That means the measuring is not to discover which one is closer. It's a performance that has to be done. If that has to be done by the elders, you cannot make a shliach. That's something you have to do, right? Now, there's some confusion about tefillin. Because on the one hand, for you to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin, it has to be on your arm. You can't ask somebody else to wear tefillin for you. But the mitzvah is not wearing the tefillin. What bracha do you make when you put on tefillin?
Laniach.
Laniach. Laniach means to place it on your arm. That is not a mitzvah shebegufo. So, for example, if a person loses the use of his right arm, someone else can put the tefillin on his arm. Because the placing of the tefillin is not a mitzvah shebegufo. Only the place where it has to be attached is shebegufo. But not the placing. The activity of doing the tying can be done by somebody else. That's exactly what happens. You're told to put it on for you, and he makes the bracha and he puts it on for you, and you satisfy the mitzvah. So you have to be very, very careful with this idea of who can be the shliach and who can't. Anyway, you have right and left. So there, the Torah specifies the arm on which the tefillin is placed, but it thereby also specifies with which arm you do the mitzvah of placing. And you do the mitzvah of placing with the stronger arm. Also, when you wash your hands, you wash the right hand first, and then the left hand. Also, when you light Chanukah Lech, you light the leftmost candle first, and proceed to the right. Also, when the Kohen Gadol walked around the altar on the kevish, on the platform, the ramp and the platform, sovev, you always walk counterclockwise, never clockwise. What's the idea? Why are right and left distinguished in this way? What's the significance of right and left? And here, the Gemara, the Zohar is absolutely consistent. Right is chesed, and left is din. Right is loving kindness, left is justice, judgment, strict judgment, accountability. And the message is they're not equal. They're both aspects of divine activity, but they're not equal. The world was created for the sake of loving kindness. Justice and judgment and accountability are only means by which loving kindness is affected. It's only a means. Loving kindness is the end, and justice and judgment are the means. If you analyze right and left in the mitzvos, you'll see that in every case, precedence is given to right over left. By the way, there's one other case where right and left is important. I'm thinking of at the moment. How you put on your shoes. Come on, Rabbi. It makes a difference how you put on your shoes? Yeah, it makes a difference how you put on your shoes. You put on the right shoe first, and you take off the right shoe last. So let's figure out. You wash the right hand first and then the left hand because the right hand is the more important hand. So it gets the attention of being washed first. You walk around the Mizbeach, the altar, in a counterclockwise fashion. As they walked around, they faced the altar. So imagine now you're facing something and you're walking around counterclockwise. That means the right hand is leading, the left hand is following. And by the way, if you follow the rule of the Gra, and also my Rabbi Zatzal taught us, let's suppose you're called up for an aliyah. You have to go to the bima where the Torah is. So one position in halacha is walk down the shortest possible way, get as fast as possible. But the Gaon of Vilna didn't hold that way. He said, always walk around the bima counterclockwise. Don't walk clockwise. Because you treat the bima as if it were a mizbeach, as if it were the altar. And I do that as well, because that's what I learned from my Rabbi. A couple of times I was challenged, how come you did it that way? So, knowing the politics, I said, the Gaon of Vilna said so. And then I said, and also my Rebbe said so, but knowing that saying the Gaon of Vilna would settle it right away. They're not going to fight with the Gaon, right? But, okay, so that's going around. Now, your shoe is very interesting. In the morning, when you make the various brachos, the whole string of brachos in the morning, one of them is Shasli called Sarki, provided for all my needs. Gemara says that was the bracha you made when you put on your shoes. Yeah? Why? Because that's the last thing that you need. You know very well, a great proportion of the world's population goes barefoot. And they don't have to obviously suffer from it. The skin on the ball of your feet and on the underside of your feet can become very tough. I used to run track, and we used to use some kind of special treatment that made the skin tough. And then you don't have to worry about going barefoot. Indigenous Americans, according to the current lingo, went barefoot and they ran down animals in the forest and they didn't have any problems. So if you had shoes, then you had everything. So having shoes is like the symptom of being fully equipped. Now, if you follow the rule that I said, you put the right shoe on first, and take it off last, it means that the right foot is shod, to use an awful, empty, elderly term. It's more inclusively protected by a shoe than the left. The left foot has a shoe on it strictly less time than the right, because the right you put it on first, you take it off last. So you're giving precedent to the right foot over the left foot. In each case, in Chanukah Lecht, you're moving from left to right. So right is the goal. Right is the direction in which you are going, similar to going around the Mizbeach. And so it is. So when a person does a mitzvah that depends on right and left, part of him is thinking, I'm giving precedence to loving kindness here. I'm pushing loving kindness as the fundamental principle. And each of these mitzvahs drives that home. And there are a bunch of them. So that's driven home quite often. Now, take Sidurim. Let me sit here. And I'll show you what it says about Tefillin. This is really a bit surprising, what it says, as I will show you. And here you'll have a really deep Kabbalistic idea. This is on page 7. Okay, so they quote the verses, and then it says, Okay, let's see where we can start here. I think it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 lines down at the very end of the line. So that we will remember the miracles and wonders that he did with us when he took us from Egypt. And that he has a strength and dominion over those above and those below to do with them as he wishes. He has commanded us to put the tefillin upon the arm to recall the outstretched arm of the Exodus. And that it be opposite the heart so that it will subjugate, that means take control of, the desires and thoughts of our heart to his service, may his name be blessed. And upon the head, opposite the brain, so that the soul that is in my brain, together with my other senses and potentials, may all be subjugated to his service. May his name be blessed. Okay, so we have 3 bodily areas that are associated with tefillin. The arm, the heart, and the head. The heart is to dedicate, subjugate the desires and thoughts of a heart to Hashem. The head is the soul of my brain and other senses and potentials should be subjugated to his service. So the heart is to be under his service, and the head is to be under his service, and the arm? Here's an obvious thought. How about the arm representing action?
It recalls.
Action. And then I should say, it's on my arm that I should subjugate my actions to doing his will. And all 3 will be consistent. And I'm not just pulling this out of the air. Rabbi Yonah actually says this. One of the great Rishonim says, it's consistent. All 3 places in the body are to remember to dedicate each element of the person, his power of action and his thoughts, his desires and his intellect, all of them to Hashem's service. But the paragraph here doesn't say that. It splits arm from heart and brain and avoids the obvious application that the arm represents your actions and that should be dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why is that? What's the point of that? So, the paragraph begins to remember the miracles that he did when he took us out of Egypt, and to know that he has strength and power over everything. And then it says, you put it on the arm to remember his outstretched arm. So that's the message, according to this paragraph, that Tefillin is supposed to teach us. The arm is not our power, not our control, not our actions. No, it's his power, his control, and his actions. And now maybe you hear a little bit, oh yeah, which arm does it go on? Right, it goes on the weaker arm. So maybe that's part of the message, that my arm is the weak arm, not the strong arm. My contribution to an action is the weak contribution. The strong element in the action is God's element in the action. And now the underlying metaphysical message is this. We just saw 5 minutes ago the idea of shlichus, that when you do a mitzvah, you're doing it on behalf of God, you're doing it as God's agent. It's really a kind of partnership. But now there's a deeper idea here. What happens when you do any action at all? Okay, you make a decision. That decision takes place in your soul. After that, what happens? Well, your body moves. Really? Why does your body move? Why does your body move? What shall I do now? In 3 seconds, I'm going to lift up my hand. 2, 1, 0! Okay, I decided my hand should go up. But why did my hand go up? According to this picture, because of God made it go up. God controls the physical world. God makes everything that happens in the physical world happen. It's his power, not my power. My contribution is will. But as far as the action is concerned, I'm not in control of that. And by the way, Rarely, but from time to time, you do get a forceful reminder of that. You may have had the experience of swimming, and your legs are kicking, propelling you through the water, and suddenly you get a cramp, and your soul issues the order, kick! And the leg says, no! Not kicking, sorry, cramp! So you can remind you, I guess, maybe I'm not the one who's making it go, Because Baruch Hu sort of agrees with my decisions most of the time, but from time to time, it gives me a reminder that I'm not really in control. So this is the message here, according to the Kabbalistic idea, to remind you of something much more important, much more subtle than dedicating. Dedicating is important, but remind you that what's going on all around you is God's activity. Yeah.
So is there anything say this more carefully. Is there such a thing as a human action, or is there only divine action? They're just human decisions? Or human will?
Well, first of all, a decision is an action. It's a happening, and that's under your control.
God is not a partner in that.
He's only a partner in giving you your existence. Doesn't make it happen, but of course without him it couldn't happen. The example here is, deep sea divers who have to spend hours underwater often don't carry a big tank of oxygen down with them. They're connected by a tube to the ship that's on the surface, and the ship pumps oxygen, air, down through a tube so they can keep breathing. Sever the tube, and the guy's dead. He's not going to do anything. On the other hand, the tube just gives him life. Everything he does with that life is his own performance. So in that sense, God gives us the ability to exist, and part of that ability is the ability to make decisions. Yes, can't say that God is divorced from that, but what particular decisions we make is up to us. Sorry? Yeah. So, so then it comes out to be like a partnership. Every act is a partnership. Now, the truth is that you could ask how you divide up the roles in the partnership, and in particular, if my share is making a decision, and the actual motion of my body is produced by God, how can I have any relationship to what my body does? How can I have any credit for what the body does or responsibility for what the body does? Let's say, for example, giving tzedakah. You can't give tzedakah in your soul. The recipient won't get anything out of it. Your hand has to deliver the coin into his hand. And that's the body. So you could think, okay, decision, that's nice. But the mitzvah of giving charity is done by the body. And that God is doing. So it has nothing to do with me. I think the answer to that is that it's an incorrect analysis. What I'm going to tell you now is my own thought. I understand it's based on the way the Torah should be understood, but I didn't see it explicitly anywhere. In order to be responsible for something that happens, you don't have to be the cause of its happening. All you have to know is that when you do X, it happens, even if you're not making it happen. Because you know from experience that when you do X, it happens. When you don't do X, it doesn't happen. So somebody asks for charity. I'm making up my mind, and I decide, yes, I'm going to give him charity. At which point, the body hands over the money, because God causes the body to do that. But I know from experience that when I decide not to give him charity, the body doesn't hand it over. So that being the case, when I'm asked and I make the decision to give it over, I'm responsible because I've done something which I know will result in the person getting the charity, even if I'm not the one who's doing it, I'm not the one who's making it happen, but still, it was up to me whether it would happen or not, Because I know from experience that when I decide not to do it, it doesn't happen. That's enough to be responsible for what you do. Well, I won't use that example. That example is not good. So I think this is generally the case, and therefore we are responsible for what the body does, even though we are not strictly speaking the cause of what the body does. So that means that the idea of human action becomes robust. The idea of human action does, in terms of responsibility, which is I think the crucial thought here. Causality is only interesting because it results from responsibility. Otherwise, I wouldn't be interested in causality either. And indeed, there are cases of causality where you don't end in responsibility. If you trip over something in the sidewalk and you fall and you smash something, your body caused it to break, but you're not responsible for it, and therefore I'm not interested in the causality. So I think that the idea of human action becomes quite, it's not limited and sequestered to only decision making and nothing else matters. I think it matters a lot. You have a question? Sorry? After the okay. So that's what is being said here about about tefillin. Now, similarly, before you put on tzitzis, oh golly, do they have it here? Let's see. Yeah, on page 5. And here you have the formula which makes it into a Kabbalistic first sentence, which I'm not going to. But it says here that I'm ready to wrap my body in a talis, so my soul, my 248 organs, and my 365 sinews, whatever they are, be wrapped in the illumination of Tzitzis, which has a numerical value of 613. So according to the Kabbalistic picture of the world, 613 is an absolutely fundamental number. Everything, both physical and spiritual, is based on 613. How is a long and complicated story, which I don't know all the details of, but it's true for the elements in the spiritual world, it's true for the physical things in particular, it's true for the human body. Now, this paragraph says, the talis has a very special relationship to 613, because the numerical value, now not of the word talis, the word talis just means the garment, a four-cornered piece of cloth that you wrap your body in with no strings attached is also a talis. Talis just means garment. The tzitzis are what make it into a garment with which you can do the mitzvah. So, they say, well, tzitzis carries the number 613. Let's see, does it really? On this page 4, in the middle of the third line, you have the word tzitzis. Right? This Misatev Kufi Bat Tzitzis. So let's see. Tzadi is 90, and Yud is 10, which is 100. And Tzadi is another 90, so that's 190. And the Tuf is 400, so that's 590. 590?
Isn't it 2 years?
One more Yud.
600.
Where's the extra Yud?
Is it 2 years?
Where?
Oh,
Do you see it on the page?
Yud.
Do you see it on the page?
I thought it was.
Oh yeah, no.
Whoa.
How about that, boys and girls? Ha! Look at that. The second Yud isn't there. No, it's not spelled with 2 Yuds. Nevertheless, Rashi on the spot says you count another 10. Because the dot under the second tzadi, the single dot, is the sound of a Yud. And gematria can be based on sounds without physical letters. Surprise, surprise. And I discovered this when I said to my Rabbi, Baal Shem Tov says that the word Hodu is 21, like one of the names of God. And I said, really? It's spelled Hey Dalet Vav. So, we're missing some numbers there. And the Rabbi said, don't you know that the O sound counts as another Vav, which gives you another 6? And I said, no, I don't know that. He said, well, look up Rashi on Tzitzis. Right there in the Chumash. Right? Rashi's pretty authoritative. Okay, so that gives you 600, but it's still only 600. So you look in the knots of the string, there are 5 knots, and there are 8 string ends hanging down, and that's 13. So the word tzitzis carries the number 613. And that means that the talus somehow embodies all 613. Now I say, well, Rabbi, this is kind of fanciful. The extra yud and 8 string ends and 5 and 13 and so forth and so on. Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, there is a chazal which says that the mitzvah of tzitzis weighs equally to all 613 commandments. Now, here you need to know something, that when chazal say A equals B or weighs equally to B, it always means in some specific respect or other. It never means they're identical. It always means in some specific respect. That's what they mean when they say it. So it means that you have to ask yourself, in what respect is that? After all, if you're going to compare tzitzis on the one hand with the whole 613 mitzvahs, golly, the 613 have symptoms of greatness that don't apply to tzitzis at all. For example, if you violate Shabbos, it's a capital crime. If you violate tzitzis, it's not a capital crime. If you violate Shabbos and certain other mitzvahs, you suffer the spiritual penalty of being cut off from God. If you violate the mitzvah of tzitzis, you're not cut off from God. If you violate certain other mitzvahs, you're punished by lashes. You're not punished by lashes if you violate the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis doesn't have any of these distinctions. But in the 3rd paragraph of the Shema, where you have the mitzvah of tzitzis, there it says you should put the tzitzis on in order to remember all of the commandments. Oh, there we go. It's there to remember all of the commandments. So this one mitzvah enables to remember all of them. That's the sense in which they're parallel. That's a chazal. So when this paragraph says it's number 613, you should have in mind all the mitzvahs. Yeah, it's based on a chazal that it's equal to all of the commandments in this respect, which is important enough for the psukim to describe to you. Okay, now you're sort of enwrapping yourself in the symbol of all of the commandments. That means to say you want your whole life to be enveloped in all of the commandments. That's a very profound thing to say. The final capstone to it, which you probably have heard, you don't think of because we don't have it. What about the blue thread? So the Gemara says, the blue thread, the blue of the thread is similar to the blue of the sea. The blue of the sea is similar to the blue of the heavens. And the blue of the heavens is similar to the blue of the throne of glory. So when you look at the blue thread, what you should have in mind is the connection to the throne of glory. Now, if you're clever and logical, you should ask, why am I going through the sea and the sky? Blue is blue. So why not say that looking at the blue thread connects me to the blue of the throne of glory? Then the answer is, you need a lesson in logic, that A is similar to B, and B is similar to C, and C is similar to D, does not imply that A is similar to D. Because similar to is only approximate. And if you have 3 approximate steps, the beginning and the end may not be approximately the same at all. So it means you can't get from the blue thread to the throne of glory without the intermediary steps. You can't get there. Which means if you're going to link yourself to the throne of glory, you've got to take the rest of the creation along with you. That's how you're linked. You don't link by leapfrogging the creation and stepping out of it to connect yourself. No, you link by carrying the rest of it along with you. That's a very, very profound message. A profound spiritual message. So these paragraphs help introduce you to the deeper meanings of mitzvos, and this is something the Chasidic movement did quite regularly. They used Kabbalistic ideas to show you how the mitzvos are linked to one another, and how they're linked to much deeper themes. You are supposed to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of your abilities, including your brain. And one of the things that your brain is useful for is when you do a mitzvah to have in mind the meanings of the mitzvah. After all, the Torah sometimes tells us the meanings of the mitzvah. Why did the Torah do that? Because it wants us to have it in mind. Now, the ones that it tells us is there quite clearly, but it's a symptom of a much broader theme. And maybe the most dramatic example of this is the mitzvah of sukkah. Because in the Gemara, there's a machlekes between two Tanoim. What does the sukkah that we sit in, that we build, what does it represent? One says it represents the clouds of glory, and the other says it represents the huts that our ancestors used when they were traveling through the wilderness. They built themselves huts. So these two views as to what the huts symbolize. Now in the Shulchan Aruch, there is a siman whose whole content is simply to tell you that the huts symbolize the clouds of glory. So some of the commentators ask, the Shulchan Aruch is a book of law and custom. It's a book of instructions what to do. This disagreement in the Gemara is the disagreement of symbolism. Why does the Shulchan Aruch actually tell you which symbolism is correct, or which symbolism we follow? I should better to say it better. Which symbolism we follow? Why does it do that? Why does it bother? And the answer is because thinking of the symbolism while you're in the sukkah is part of the mitzvah of sukkah. So the Shulchan Aruch is telling you what to do. And if that's the case in this case, although in the vast majority of cases, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin that you're required to do it, it's definitely something that's worthwhile doing. And that's what introductory paragraphs like this before the mitzvah that you do is helps you have some of that information in mind. And it's not just here, but in certain types of Sidurim, these are written over and over again, these types of paragraphs introducing the mitzvah, so that those of us who say them before we do the mitzvah, we have a rich intellectual context in which the mitzvah is put. This is something that the Chasidic movement, by the way, the Chasidic movement wasn't alone. The whole Sephardi world does this, because they are much more attached to Kabbalah than normal Ashkenazim, and they recite paragraphs like this before mitzvos, so as to have these things in mind. The Chasidic movement attached for themselves this aspect of Sephardi service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way we do mitzvos. Yeah.
Is there either a historical or philosophical or both why Ashkenazim have drifted away from explicit references to Kabbalah?
I'll tell you, you have to be a little bit careful. All of the great Ashkenazi Torah authorities knew Kabbalah. It's a shock to naive Shiva students to find out that the Gaon of Vilna was perhaps the greatest authority of Kabbalah of his time, and he wrote very extensive commentaries in Kabbalah. So when they think, oh, well, that's for the wishy-washy Sephardim, which is a terrible, terrible calumny, terrible insult to their intelligence, or it's for the Hasidim who like stories and so forth and so on. Excuse me, you couldn't read one sentence of the pages and pages that the Gaon of Vilna wrote about Kabbalah. There is a shach. The shach writes that a person should be 40 years old before he studies the Kabbalah. So that shach has become famous. The shach is one of the great Ashkenazi poskim. But the whole of the Sephardi world does not follow that shach. And the Chasidic world does not follow that shach. And the Arizal, who died before the age of 40, and was the greatest Kabbalist in the last 500 years, didn't follow that shach. And the Ramchal, who died before the age of 40, who was the second greatest Kabbalist of the last 500 years, well, Chaim Vital, I'm counting him as part of the Arizal, also didn't follow that shach. So there are lots and lots of great Kabbalistic authorities that did not follow that shach. So it could be that the shach's influence was uppermost in certain Ashkenazi circles. And if you don't get it until you're 40, and usually people at 40 are very difficult for them to spend time learning it and so on and so on, could be that's responsible for it in part. But the vast majority of the total world does not follow that shach. I must tell you an experience that I had up here in Bukharim, which is like, half a mile from here, where they have the Sephardi institutions there. So I used to live here behind the yeshiva, and so I often daven mincha there. And I davened mincha, I was waiting for Ma'ariv. It was dusk, dusk was falling. And a kid comes over to me, I don't know how old he was, 10, 12, something like that, and says to me in Hebrew, "Why do we daven Ma'ariv?" Who are you exactly? Mm-hmm. And why are you talking to me exactly? Why do we daven Ma'ariv? So I started to tell him, the Gemara says that it's Rishus, but Tosfos says that Rishus really means that it's a mitzvah, and it's a low-level mitzvah. No, he said. Partzuf Abba is in conjunction with Partzuf Ima, and they have a hashpah and zah, and there's a shefa, and there's a zivug, and that... I don't know what he was talking about. I had no clue. He's using all this Kabbalistic terminology. And he goes on for a couple of minutes, and then he walks off. Disappears into the dusk, Oh, really? Why did he say that to me?
Did you find that he was right, or did you think about it later and it was a bunch
I don't remember exactly what he said, but he probably was right. As far as kids study this stuff and they memorize it, right? By the way, there are two ways to hide something. If you have a diamond, you want to hide it. One way to hide it is to dig a hole in the backyard and bury it. The other way to hide it is to put some trinkets on your card table, on your coffee table, and put it there with the trinkets. No one will think of looking for it there.
Looking for it?
So I think that the Sephardim who memorize it, they memorize it as kids. They have no clue what it means. They just know to rattle off the formulas. So for them, it's hidden by putting it on the table with the trinkets, and for Ashkenazim, it's hidden by burying it in the backyard, right? But it was one of life's very, very peculiar experiences. There's this person, total stranger, comes up to me and asks me this question and walks off. That happened to me one other time. I was in Chicago. I had given a shiur in some gigantic business building. I was waiting to be picked up. I was standing on the sidewalk, and a person who looked like a frum Jew walked up to me and said, "In ancient times, the Talmudic times, times of the Mishnah, where did Jews spend Yom Kippur?" I said, "Where did Jews spend Yom Kippur?" "Why are you asking me? Who are you and who am I?" It's a total stranger. So I don't know, He said they spent it on the road, on the way up to Jerusalem for Sukkot, because it could take a week or 2 weeks to get there. And on the way is Yom Kippur, a few days before Sukkot, and you maybe slept overnight in a barn, and you davened with whoever happened to be there, not your favorite chazan, with your seat in shul with the locked box where you keep your goodies and so forth and so on. No, you're on the road with the Jews who happened to be there. And then he walked on and disappeared. Who is he? Why did he do this? Why did he say this to me? Okay, I can make up stories. But there are 2 times when complete strangers came up to me and told me these things, and I've used them since then. I have things to say about them now. But just like interesting experiences thing. Okay.